Nobody in history has ever gotten freedom by appealing to the moral sense of the people oppressing them. Assata Shakur. I thought that a fitting way to start this episode, and I'm going to continue the intro to this by reading something I found in an article online in a blog called New America. newamerica.org is the site. She is attuned to the realization that we as a society lack a shared moral basis, referring to Assata Shakur, that power defines politics, and that it is the fight for power that we must ultimately engage in if we are to change human conditions. Indeed, when solely constructed in terms of individual action, moral analysis can often lead to empty posturing rather than any form of political coordination. The article continues to say, while I am inclined to agree with these insights, I also believe that it would be wrong to conceive of politics as separate from concerns over morality. In recognizing the Poor People's Campaign, led by Dr. Barber, as an explicitly moral movement, I want to highlight how moral analysis need not depoliticize injustice, and how it can instead aid in political mobilization and engagement. Now, there's a lot going on in the world right now. And now that the election's over, and we're out of the electoral playtime in the sandbox, now we're really forced to look at what's going on around us. Now, we're seeing the people that Biden is aligning himself with, the people that he's adding to his cabinet. And, it's essentially a murderer's row of neolibs and people who have taken part in old wars, people from the Obama administration. And let's not forget, the Obama administration is how we got to the Trump administration, right? So I've said this before, and I will say this again. Anyone who's trying to go back to the Obama era is saying the same thing that MAGA people are. What they're saying is, make America great again. They're just quibbling as to when it was indeed great. This is a bad sign, right? And my point, and the reason that I led with those quotes, is that we seem to have been making the error of doing essentially what mainstream Democrats do. And that thing is appealing to the moral sense of people to the right of us, people with more power, people who in essence are oppressing us. Because when it gets right down to it, the right is about power, and the left is about essentially improving conditions for people. Now, everyone to the right of you, right? These are people that generally have more power, more status, right? In terms of how things are currently aligned. And that's true on the so-called left too. And let's just, for the sake of this conversation, assume that the Democrats are on the left. But what the Democrats do, and when I say the Democrats, I don't mean people who vote Democratic, but the party bosses, the mainstream structure of the party, right? Not the insurgent progressive wing or any of those people, but the people who really have the power in the party. What their strategy has been in both of the last elections has been to appeal to moderate Republicans. Now, why would they do that? They appeal to moderate Republicans because what they're doing is they're essentially appealing to the moral sense of people to the right of them, people who have more power, people who have essentially more access to power and more rights already. And what doing that is saying is, okay, you see how messed up things are, right? Don't you want to come a little bit to the left with us? Just a little bit? We're not going to end wars or redistribute your wealth or anything. We're just saying, look at how cartoonish, how vapid, how cruel the people to the right of you are right now, right? So they're appealing to essentially an empty moral analysis of Trump and the Republican Party as bad without actually offering a systems or power analysis of the whole thing. And my contention and my apology, actually, is that a lot of my strategy has been to radicalize liberals, right? Because I grew up with them. I grew up with and associate with still to this day, though less and less increasingly, people who went to Ivy League colleges. I went to what essentially could be considered an Ivy League prep school, right? And so a lot of the people that I know still came from that world. A lot of the people that I went to high school with, middle school with, they're people who are in power right now, right? Their parents were in power. Their parents were working for stock markets, for Goldman Sachs. They were in government. I remember I had a job as an au pair one year on Martha's Vineyard, in one of the ritzier areas of Martha's Vineyard. And there were people like the Kennedys just stopping by the house and things like that, right? These are the people that I grew up around half the time, right? Half the time it was with the so-called upper crust, the vulture class, really. And the other half the time it was with my family and with the people I went to church with. And they were, those were essentially poor people, often, mostly poor and black people. But now, I've realized that my strategy has still been, let's appeal to these people to the right of me. Let's appeal to these people with more power than me and say, look, don't you see that people are starving? Don't you see that this pandemic is wreaking havoc among the poor, among black people? Don't you see that police are killing black and brown people disproportionately and poor people of all colors? Don't you see this? Can't you just help us a little? Can't you do a little something? And that, I admit, has been an error, a tactical, structural error. Because what that's asking for is charity. It's not asking for a systems change. It's not helping to empower others. What it's asking people who have more power to do is just drip a little down from their big bucket into ours. And that is always going to be a losing strategy. As the Democrats found out this year in the election, where they won the election, right? And even though they won by millions of votes, it still should be considered a squeaker, because a lot of those millions of extra popular votes came from cities where there are just more people, et cetera, et cetera. So instead of turning out their base, instead of giving the people what they want and need, what they did was they talked to rich people and they said, come over our way a little bit, but just a little bit. Because if you look at all the things that we're going to offer, we're not offering any real change. We're not offering anything that's going to make you less wealthy or essentially turn people's eye towards the fact that you're not actually better than them and don't deserve more than what they have, or at least not that much more than what they have, at very least. And they won. And so now a lot of the talk from people in power, again, in the Democratic establishment, is that it was a winning strategy. But that is without looking at the fact that they actually lost ground in every other measurable way, right? Yes, they won the presidency, but they lost House seats. They did not take over the Senate when it was it should have been a gimme, right? Even for those Senate seats. And why is that? Because our strategy, and I think it's not just the strategy of the Democratic Party, but I think it's all of us. And that's why I offer a mea culpa, because I'm one of all of us, right? I am an American, as much as, that is distasteful sometimes. In America, we are obsessed with our royalty. And our royalty is the vulture class. It's the wealthy. It's the powerful. And we would rather look up to them and ask them to hand us down something, because we still sort of believe in the back of our minds that trickle-down economics is the way things work, right? Maybe we think secretly that there should be people who have more. Maybe we think that the people who have more than us deserve it. And we can't really blame us for thinking that, because that's what we've been taught. It's coming out of the walls, right? But this episode is going to be a kind of a roundup of where we are right now. But it's also just going to be a talk about why we need to stop looking right and start looking left. why we need to stop looking up and start looking down. In terms of strategy, in terms of the people to whom we need to listen, in terms of the things we need to do to get ourselves free, to get ourselves in better conditions, we need to cut off those people who have had power and who haven't done anything with it. Or even worse, have used that power to make us poorer, sicker, less well-educated, and in essentially all measurable ways worse off. Some of them do it maliciously. Some of them do it essentially insouciantly because they don't really care. They don't know any better. But in either case, their time is over. The election's over. We can say what we want. We can tell the truth now without worrying about the strategy that I agree was necessary to at least electorally beat Donald Trump and the current version of the Republican Party at the executive level. But now playtime's over. Now it's time to get to work. And now it's time to focus fire. The people need to focus fire on all the people who have power. All of them. Let's talk about it. So let me start this episode with a little bit of good news. Actually, it's a big piece of good news. Kenneth, my cousin, who I've talked about in a few episodes, who has been having the legal troubles and who is stuck in Rikers, he's getting out. He's getting out soon. He's getting out, if things go perfectly, as soon as a week or two from now, but if they go as planned, we're talking January. January, it seems to be mid-January to late January seems to be the latest that he'll be getting out. And that is fantastic news. And I want to thank people who offered advice, thank people who looked up things for us, thank people who tweeted on his behalf, and just people who have, helped to get the word out and just have been thinking about, carceral justice, especially as it relates to his specific case. #FreeCanB. But I also want to give, after the cheers, let's give some jeers. Because I got major jeers for a lot of the people who offered basically legal advice, and 9 out of 10 of them threw up their hands and said, well, it's a lost cause. And I understand why they think that, or they thought that, but as it turns out, they weren't even right legally, right? And this ties in to kind of the overarching theme of today. A lot of those people who've been to law school, and I won't go as hard as I did on them in previous episodes, but a lot of those people, they're part of the power structure. And so they don't understand the fierce urgency of now. They don't understand that someone in Rikers isn't just a statistic, isn't just someone who basically came afoul of the law and there's nothing you can do for them. They don't understand that those people are real people who are suffering badly, right? These are people who are, they're making a good wage. These are people who are probably able to work from home right now. These are people who have the money to get themselves N95 masks and stay masked up when they go to the store, and who can have things delivered to them, right? These are the people and a lot of these are the same people who are going to brunches now, going to eat at restaurants now, even though their waiters are dressed like they're in Tyvek spacesuits, essentially serving them their food because they're terrified of dying, right? These people they're the good end of the vulture class. And so of course they don't understand, right? And of course they're not going to put themselves out on a limb for someone they don't know who, according to the books, committed a crime, right? But with the new lawyer that came in, and thankfully he got a new lawyer, was assigned a new lawyer for reasons I'm not 100% certain about right now, but I am very thankful for. This new lawyer came in and basically looked at the entire case and essentially argued that whatever they still had on him, he had already done time served. And that they couldn't accuse him of more things and that the original thing they had accused him of, they didn't have evidence for, or they weren't willing to give up the evidence for, so they couldn't press more charges. So even through the standard way of looking at the legal system, right? Even through the standard way of going about this, there were still plenty of options. But most of the people who heard this story, once removed, twice removed, however they heard it, they just saw a statistic. They just saw a mental exercise. They didn't see a young man in Rikers Island, in solitary confinement often, in being switched from dorm to dorm, hang out with, in a COVID-infested location where there's tons of danger, right? Where the food is terrible and will half kill you or make you sick, right? Where it smells bad, where it stinks, right? Where it's just physically uncomfortable to be. They don't see that. What they see is this number, that number, this fact, that fact. It's dry. It's not a real person, right? And lawyers, economists, people like this, these people are all the vulture class. These are, in essence, our class enemies. And the more I try to fight it, the more it becomes obvious to me. We are leaving out class war in all of these discussions, and it's killing us. It's literally killing us. Because the people who are fighting the class war are the vulture class, even the gentle ones of the vulture class. They're fighting the war and they're winning, and we're not even fighting. This brings me to the coup, right? The attempted coup that Donald Trump and his ilk were trying to pull, are still trying to pull. I mean, it's ridiculous to me how the fact that they're not likely to be successful has a lot of people, especially some of these same people, right? These people who believe in the institutions of America, has them just trying to ignore the whole thing. Trump's running around the house trying every lock on every door and window, poking and prodding at the walls to find a loose brick, shimmying under the porch like a raccoon in the cold, looking for any tiny breach through which he can clamber into power for a second term. And through the obvious attempts to literally steal the house from under us and evict or enslave anyone in it, we take one look out the window, see what he's doing, and go, he ain't getting in, and go back to sleep. Did I mention the house is on fire? That the foundation is brittle and the entire edifice shivers in every strong wind? That many of the people inside the house want the thief to get in, and others are too hungry and weary from overwork or lack of work to pay attention to this would-be home invader? For him and people like him, power is everything. Ideology? It's a tool. Morality? Completely subjective. Alliances? Subject to change without notice. All that matters is victory. What they're thinking is, can we get in the house? We don't care where the doors are. We don't care about knocking. We don't care about the polite way to enter. We don't care whether or not we're invited. And conversely, the American so-called left is in the house in a robe and slippers, nice silk robe and slippers, sipping a nice cup of tea in their sleeping cap, doing nothing as they hear the fiddlings of lockpicks and the straining of hinges. And when eventually, inevitably, the villain does get in, if they're not stopped, which they always do get in, with time, if they're not stopped. When the villain gets in, they drop their mug of tea with a start, and as the blows begin to rain down, they say, "You're not supposed to be here," as if those words will snap the assailant back into a sense of goodness that they manifestly never had. As if they'll say, "Oh, dreadfully sorry about that. No idea what came over me. I'll be on my way," and scoot back out the way they came. That's never happened. It never will happen. Power. Power is what we're talking about. Wielding it without apology. But for the good. That's what we need to do. And in terms of this house, what that power means, what that power should do right now is say, we don't care about the cracks in our foundation. We don't care about the broken shutters that you might be able to get through. We're going to come outside of the house and say, you have no place in our house. You must leave now or face consequences. And this, basically no one has done. There have been a few protests, right? A few objections, token objections to the way that the current administration is handling the transition of power. And how they're handling the transition of power, if this were any other country, we would long ago have sent in someone to oversee their electoral process and to ensure a smooth transition of power. But in our own country, we let them try the locks over and over again. We're not fixing any of the locks. We're not fixing the cracks in the foundation. Okay? We're not checking the roof for leaks. We're not checking any part of the house. We're not shoring up, fixing, or demolishing this house to rebuild a better one. We're ignoring that we're being invaded. And we're ignoring the fact at our own peril. Because guess what? The next person that comes to try and rob the house, well, they're off right now in the bushes, watching this current attempt to break in. And maybe they're also laughing at how bad the current robber is. But they're learning. They're watching every place that this current villain tried to get in and could not. They're watching what they could do better. What they will do better next time when they have the opportunity. And that opportunity is coming if we don't do something about it.